I overheard my wife brag about training me like a pet. I recorded the abuse, forced divorce, took freedom, and rebuilt life no longer controlled. It was a regular Thursday evening. I'd gotten home early from work and decided to surprise her. The house seemed quiet, but I could hear voices coming from the back patio. As I approached the sliding door, I recognized her voice mixed with her usual crew of friends. They were having their weekly wine session, which normally meant harmless gossip about neighbors or complaints about their husbands. But this time was different. This time, I was the main topic. I stayed behind the curtain, not because I intended to spy, but because something in her tone made me freeze. There was this smugness, this superiority that I'd never heard before. And then she said it. "You want to know how I keep him exactly where I want him? It's actually pathetic how easy it is." The laughter that followed made my stomach turn. Here was my wife of 8 years talking about me like I was some kind of pet she'd trained. First, I control the bedroom completely. When he's good, he gets rewarded. When he steps out of line, I cut him off for weeks. You should see how desperate he gets. More laughter. One of her friends chimed in, "That's genius. But doesn't he ever fight back?" "That's the beautiful part," my wife continued, clearly enjoying herself. "I've conditioned him to think that any time I'm upset, it's his fault. I use guilt like a weapon. If he ever questions me, I just start crying and tell him he's being mean to me. Works every single time." I felt my jaw clench. Years of arguments flashed through my mind, moments where I'd back down because she'd started tearing up, making me feel like some kind of monster for having an opinion. "But the real secret," she went on, "is that I make him think he needs my approval for everything. What to wear, who to hang out with, how to spend his money. I've got him so trained that he asks permission to buy a sandwich." The group erupted in laughter again. One woman said, "Oh my God, that's terrible, but also brilliant. The best part is he thinks this is what a good marriage looks like. He actually believes that me controlling every aspect of his life means I care about him. It's like having a husband and a pet rolled into one." My hands were shaking now, not from sadness or hurt, but from pure rage. Here I was thinking we had a partnership while she was running a one-woman show with me as her main prop. "What if he ever catches on?" another friend asked. "He won't. He's too scared of losing me. I've made sure he thinks he could never do better. Sometimes I even flirt with other guys right in front of him just to keep him insecure. Keeps him grateful for whatever scraps of attention I throw his way." That was it. That was the moment everything clicked into place. Every time she dismissed my feelings, every time she'd made me question my own judgment, every time I'd apologized for things that weren't even my fault, it all made sense. "Now, the funniest part," she continued, her voice dripping with satisfaction, "is that he thinks he chose me. Poor guy has no idea that I've been pulling his strings since day one. I'd heard enough. Actually, I'd heard exactly what I needed to hear." As I stood there, hidden behind that curtain, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Clarity. Pure, crystal clear clarity about what my marriage really was. But here's the thing about discovering you've been played for a fool. You have two choices. You can collapse into self-pity and prove them right, or you can use that information to your advantage. I chose option 2. I quietly made my way back to the front door, opened and closed it loudly enough for them to hear, then called out, "Honey, I'm home." The patio went dead silent. When I walked through the house with the biggest smile I could manage, she was already scrambling to clean up their wine glasses, looking slightly panicked. "Oh, you're early," she said, forcing that sweet voice she always used when she wanted something. "Traffic was light," I replied casually. "How was your day with the girls?" "Oh, just the usual gossip." She was studying my face, trying to read if I'd heard anything. "I'm sure," I said, still smiling. "I'm going to hop in the shower. Don't let me interrupt your fun." As I walked away, I could feel her eyes on me. Good. Let her wonder. Let her second-guess herself for once. In the shower, I stood under the hot water and let it all sink in. 8 years. 8 years of thinking I was in a loving marriage while she was running psychological experiments on me. 8 years of her friends knowing exactly how she manipulated me. But you know what? I wasn't angry anymore. I was grateful. She'd just given me the most valuable gift imaginable, the truth. And now that I knew the game she was playing, I could start playing my own. The next morning, I watched her make breakfast like she always did, humming that little tune she thought was charming. But now I saw it differently. Every move was calculated, every smile designed to maintain her control. She'd perfected this routine over the years: make breakfast, ask about my day, subtly guide the conversation toward something she wanted. Today would be different, though. Today, I had information she didn't know I had. "Sleep well?" she asked, not looking up from the eggs. "Like a baby," I replied, sipping my coffee. "You know, I was thinking about what you said yesterday." She froze for just a second. "What I said about what?" "Oh, you know, about how marriage is all about finding the right balance of power." I'd never said that to her, but I wanted to see how she'd react to something that sounded like her philosophy. Her hand tightened around the spatula. "I don't remember saying that." "Really? Huh. Maybe I dreamed it." I shrugged casually. Funny how the mind works. She turned around, studying my face. "Are you feeling okay? You seem different today." "Different how?" I asked, genuinely curious about her assessment. "I don't know. More confident, I guess." There it was. She'd noticed the shift already. The version of me she'd trained to seek her approval was nowhere to be found, and it was making her nervous. "Maybe I'm just having a good day," I said. "You know what? I think I'll wear my blue shirt today, the one you always say makes me look too flashy." Her mouth opened slightly. For 8 years, I'd let her pick my clothes every morning. This was uncharted territory. "But the gray one would look so much better with your pants," she said, her voice taking on that slightly whiny tone she used when things weren't going her way. "No, I'm feeling blue today." I stood up and kissed her forehead. "Thanks for breakfast, but I'll grab something on the way to work." Another first. I always ate the breakfast she made, even when I wasn't hungry, because refusing would start a whole conversation about how hard she worked to take care of me. "But I made your favorite eggs," she protested. "I know, and they look great." "Save them for tomorrow." I could feel her staring at me as I headed upstairs. In the mirror, I caught a glimpse of someone I barely recognized, a man who didn't ask permission to wear what he wanted or eat what he wanted. When I came back down in my blue shirt, she was waiting by the door, with that forced smile she wore when she was trying to reset the conversation. "You look handsome," she said, straightening my collar. "But you know that shirt wrinkles easily." "Good thing I know how to iron," I replied. Her smile faltered. "Since when do you iron your own shirts?" "Since today. Apparently I'm full of surprises." That evening she was extra attentive during dinner, asking about my day with unusual interest. She was fishing, trying to figure out what had changed. I decided to give her something to really think about. "You know what's interesting?" I said, cutting into my steak. "I was talking to Tom from accounting today, and he told me the funniest story about his wife." "Oh?" she said, pretending casual interest. "Yeah. Apparently she was bragging to her friends about how she controls everything he does: food, clothes, money, the works." "Can you imagine being married to someone like that?" The color drained from her face. "That sounds awful, right? I mean, what kind of person treats their spouse like a trained animal? And what kind of person would put up with it?" She was gripping her fork so tightly her knuckles were white. Maybe she just cares about him." I laughed, and it wasn't a nice laugh. "Cares about him by humiliating him to her friends? By treating him like he's too stupid to make his own decisions?" "You don't know the whole story," she said weakly. "You're right. I don't know the whole story, but I know enough to feel sorry for the poor guy." I looked directly at her. "I mean, imagine finding out your wife thinks you're pathetic. Imagine discovering that the person you trust most in the world has been playing psychological games with you for years." She wasn't eating anymore. She was just staring at her plate, probably wondering how much I actually knew. "What do you think he should do?" she asked quietly. "Tom's friend." "Well, that depends. Does he want to stay married to someone who sees him as a pet, or does he want to find out what it feels like to be treated like an equal partner?" The silence stretched between us. I could practically hear the gears turning in her head. "I think," I continued, "that once someone shows you who they really are, you should believe them." She looked up at me then. And for the first time in years I saw something I'd never seen before. Fear. Real, genuine fear that her carefully constructed world was about to come crashing down. "We should talk," she said. "Should we? About what? About us? About things?" I smiled at her, the same smile I'd been giving her for 8 years, but now it meant something entirely different. "You know what? I think you're right. We should definitely talk. But not tonight. Tonight, I'm going to watch the game in the living room on the big TV. And I'm going to have a beer. Maybe 2. For 8 years, I'd watched sports on the small TV in the den because she preferred to use the living room for her shows. Tonight, that was changing. "But my show comes on in an hour," she said. "Record it," I said, standing up and starting to clear my plate. Or watch it on your laptop. I'm sure you'll figure something out. As I walked toward the living room, I heard her whisper, "What's gotten into you?" I turned back with that same smile. Nothing's gotten into me. Maybe something's gotten out of me. And for the first time in 8 years, I spent the evening exactly where I wanted to be, doing exactly what I wanted to do. She sat in the kitchen, probably trying to figure out how to regain control of a situation that was slipping through her fingers. The beautiful thing about knowledge is that once you have it, you can't unknow it. And now that I knew her game, I could play it better than she ever imagined. Over the next few days, she tried everything in her playbook: the guilt trips, the tears, the silent treatment, even the sudden bursts of affection where she'd try to seduce me back into compliance. But here's the thing about manipulation tactics: once you recognize them, they lose all their power. Friday morning, she pulled out the big guns. "I've been thinking about what you said about Tom's friend," she began carefully. "Maybe we should go to counseling." I nearly choked on my coffee. Counseling? The woman who'd spent 8 years gaslighting me wanted to go to counseling. Why would we need counseling? I asked innocently. "Well, you seem distant lately. Different. I'm worried about us." Translation: she was worried about losing control and needed a professional setting where she could play the victim while making me look like the problem. "I feel great," I said. "Best I've felt in years, actually." Her face fell. That wasn't the response she was hoping for. "But don't you think it would be good to talk through some things? Communication is so important in marriage." "You're absolutely right. Communication is important." I looked at her directly. "So, let's communicate. Tell me about your conversation with the girls on Thursday." She went pale. "What conversation?" "The one about marriage dynamics. You know, the one where you discuss different ways couples interact with each other." "I don't know what you're talking about." I stood up slowly, walked around to her side of the table, and leaned down close enough that she could feel my breath on her ear. "We both know that's not true," I whispered. When I pulled back, her hands were trembling. Good. Let her feel what uncertainty feels like for once. That weekend, I started making changes, real, tangible changes, that she couldn't ignore or manipulate away. First, I opened my own checking account. 8 years of shared finances meant she'd been monitoring every dollar I spent, every purchase I made. That ended immediately. I transferred half of our savings into my name only and set up direct deposit for my entire paycheck. When she found the bank statements on Monday, the explosion was spectacular. "What is this?" she demanded, waving the papers in my face. "Financial independence," I replied calmly. "You can't just take our money." "Our money?" Interesting choice of words. Last time I checked, I earned every dollar in that account. "But we're married. What's yours is mine." I laughed, actually laughed. Funny how that only works one way, isn't it? When did you ever consider what was yours to be mine? That's different. How? She opened her mouth, then closed it. She couldn't explain how it was different without admitting that she'd been treating our marriage like her personal kingdom. "From now on," I continued, "we split everything down the middle: mortgage, utilities, groceries 50-50. Equal partners, remember? But I don't make as much as you. Then I guess you'll need to figure out how to budget better or maybe get a better job. You're a smart woman. I'm sure you'll manage." The next change was social. For years, she'd systematically isolated me from my friends, always finding reasons why I couldn't go out, why they were bad influences, why I should stay home with her instead. I'd let it happen because I thought it meant she wanted to spend time with me. Tuesday night, I announced I was going out with my college roommate. "But it's a work night," she protested. "And you haven't seen him in months. Won't it be awkward?" "Only one way to find out. I was hoping we could spend some quality time together tonight." I looked at her with genuine curiosity. "Quality time doing what? Watching you scroll through your phone while I pretend to enjoy whatever show you've picked? That's not fair." "You're right. It's not fair. That's why I'm changing it." She tried blocking the door, actually physically stood in front of the exit like some kind of security guard. "Move," I said quietly. "We need to talk about this, about us, about what's happening." "No, we don't. We need you to move out of my way." "And if I don't?" I smiled at her, and it wasn't a nice smile. "Then you'll discover exactly how much power you actually have in this relationship." She moved. I came home at midnight to find her waiting up in the living room, looking like a miserable, desperate version of herself. The confident woman who'd bragged to her friends about controlling me was nowhere to be found. "How was your night?" she asked, trying to sound casual. "Educational," I replied. "What did you talk about? Guy stuff?" You wouldn't be interested. Try me. I sat down across from her, studying her face. We talked about marriage, about respect, about what it means to be partners instead of parent and child. What's that supposed to mean? It means I'm done being treated like I'm too stupid to make my own decisions. Done asking permission to live my own life. Done pretending that your manipulation tactics are love. I don't manipulate you. Really? So you've never used sex as a reward or punishment? Never made me feel guilty for having opinions that differ from yours? Never dismissed my feelings as unimportant? Never made me question my own judgment about situations you were clearly wrong about? Never flirted with other men to make me insecure? Never controlled what I wore, what I ate, who I talked to? Silence. Never bragged to your friends about how easy it was to control me? Her face crumpled. You heard that? Every word. I didn't mean it the way it sounded. Yes, you did. And you know what? I'm grateful you said it. Because now I know exactly who I'm married to. I love you, she whispered, tears starting to fall. No, you don't. You love having someone you can control. You love feeling superior. You love the power. But love real love. You don't have the first clue what that looks like. I stood up and headed toward the stairs. Where are you going? To bed. In the guest room. My bed. My choice. You can't just shut me out. I turned back to her one more time. Watch me. As I climbed the stairs, I could hear her crying. 8 years ago, that sound would have had me running back to comfort her, to apologize for whatever I'd supposedly done wrong. Tonight, it sounded like the death rattle of her control over my life. And honestly, it was the most beautiful sound I'd heard in years. By Thursday, she was in full panic mode. The woman who'd spent years calmly orchestrating my every move was now scrambling like someone whose house was on fire. And in a way, it was. She tried everything: tears, anger, promises to change, even attempting to seduce me back into her web. But when you've seen behind the curtain, there's no going back to believing in the magic show. That morning, she played her nuclear card. I want a divorce, she announced over breakfast, like she was ordering coffee. I didn't even look up from my newspaper. Okay. The silence that followed was deafening. She'd expected begging, pleading, promises to be better. Instead, she got the one response that terrified her most: indifference. Okay? She repeated, her voice cracking. That's all you have to say? What else would you like me to say? You just told me you want to end our marriage. And you said, okay. Should I pretend to be devastated? Should I fall to my knees and beg you to reconsider? I folded the paper and looked at her. Sorry to disappoint you, but those days are over. You don't mean that. Try me. She started pacing, running her hands through her hair. You're calling my bluff. Was it a bluff? Because if you want a divorce, I'll have papers drawn up by Friday. We can split everything 50-50 and be done with this by Christmas. But what about our life together? Our memories? Our future plans? I laughed, and it came out harsher than I intended. Our future plans? You mean your plans for my future? The ones where I continue being your trained pet while you laugh about it with your friends? I told you I didn't mean those things. Yes, you did. And even if you didn't, the fact that you said them tells me everything I need to know about what you really think of me. She sat down heavily, the fight going out of her. So that's it. 8 years and you're just giving up. I'm not giving up. I'm waking up. There's a difference. But I love you. No, you love controlling me. And since that's no longer an option, you're panicking. That's not true. I pulled out my phone and set it on the table. Want to bet? Let's call your friend from Thursday night. You know, the one who thought your manipulation tactics were genius. Let's ask her what she thinks love looks like. Her face went white. You wouldn't. Watch me. I started scrolling through my contacts. Actually, better idea. Let's call all of them. We'll have a little conference call where you can explain to everyone how much you love me. Stop. Or better yet, let's go to your mother's house. You know, the woman who raised you to think marriage was about power dynamics instead of partnership. Let's see what she has to say about love. Please, stop. Why? Embarrassed? Funny how that works. You weren't embarrassed when you were humiliating me to your friends. She started crying again, but this time it felt different, less manipulative, more genuine, like she was finally understanding the weight of what she'd done. I can change, she whispered. Can you? Because change requires admitting you were wrong. It requires acknowledging that you've spent 8 years treating me like garbage. It requires taking responsibility for the damage you've caused. I am taking responsibility. No, you're not. You're making excuses. You're trying to minimize what you did. You're acting like this is all some big misunderstanding instead of a pattern of deliberate psychological abuse. The word abuse hit her like a physical blow. She actually flinched. I never hurt you physically. You're right. You just spent 8 years systematically destroying my self-worth, isolating me from my friends, controlling every aspect of my life, and then bragging about it to your social circle. Much better. I didn't know you felt that way. You didn't know because you never asked. You didn't care because it wasn't convenient for you to care. That afternoon, while she was at work, I made a few phone calls. First to a divorce attorney just to understand my options, then to my old college friends, the ones she'd convinced me were bad influences. Funny how quickly they welcomed me back once I explained what had been happening. But the most important call was to her best friend, the ringleader from Thursday night's humiliation session. Hey, it's me. I need to ask you something, and I want you to be honest. Okay. What's up? How long has she been talking about me the way she did on Thursday? Silence. Hello? Are you still there? Hi. I don't think I should get involved in this. You were involved the moment you laughed at her jokes about manipulating me. So I'll ask again. How long? Look, she was just venting. All wives complain about their husbands. Complaining is one thing. Bragging about psychological manipulation is something else entirely. She loves you. Does she? Because someone who loves you doesn't turn you into a joke for their entertainment. When I hung up, I had my answer. This wasn't recent behavior. This was who my wife had always been, and her friends had been enabling it for years. That evening, she came home with flowers and wine, wearing the dress she knew I liked, the full-court press. I made reservations at that place you love, she said, trying to sound casual. Cancel them. But it's Thursday. We always go out on Thursdays. We did. Past tense. Things change. I want to make this right. You can't. Some things can't be fixed with dinner and manipulation. It's not manipulation. I'm trying to show you I care. By doing exactly what you think will work on me. By pushing buttons you've spent years programming. That's literally the definition of manipulation. She threw the flowers on the counter. Fine. What do you want from me? You want me to grovel? You want me to humiliate myself the way you think I humiliated you? I want you to understand that what you did was wrong. I want you to admit that you've been treating me like an enemy instead of a partner. I want you to acknowledge that 8 years of lies and control can't be fixed with one honest conversation. So what then? We just give up? I looked at her standing there in her carefully chosen dress, holding wine she'd bought to manipulate my mood, in a kitchen where she'd served me breakfast while planning how to control my day. You gave up 8 years ago when you decided I was too stupid to be treated as an equal. I'm just finally catching up. Friday morning brought her final desperate gambit. I found her sitting at the kitchen table with red eyes and a laptop open, typing furiously. What are you doing? I asked. Writing an email to your boss. About what? About how you've been acting lately. How you're having some kind of breakdown. How you might need professional help. I felt my blood turn to ice. She was actually trying to sabotage my career now. Delete it. No, someone needs to know what's happening to you. I walked over and slammed the laptop shut. The only thing happening to me is that I finally see who I married. You're scaring me, she said. But her eyes held calculation, not fear. Good. Maybe now you know how I felt for 8 years. I'm calling your brother and your parents. They need to know you're having some kind of mental episode. That's when I realized she was going to try to turn everyone against me, paint me as unstable, while positioning herself as the concerned wife. Classic manipulation, isolate the victim by making everyone question their sanity. But I was prepared for this. I pulled out my phone and played the recording. Her voice filled the kitchen, crystal clear. I've got him so trained that he asks permission to buy a sandwich. Her face went ashen. I recorded the whole conversation, I said quietly. Every laugh, every cruel joke, every detail about how you manipulate me. You can't record people without permission. Actually, I can. One-party consent state. Look it up. She lunged for my phone, but I pulled it back. Here's what's going to happen, I continued. You're going to stop threatening my job. You're going to stop trying to turn my family against me, and you're going to sign whatever divorce papers I put in front of you. Or what? Or I send this recording to everyone, your boss, your family, your friends. Let them hear what you really think about marriage. You wouldn't. Try me. But first, let's call your mother. I'm curious what she'll think of her daughter's parenting philosophy. I started dialing. She grabbed my arm. Stop. Please. Why? Embarrassed? Imagine that. What do you want? I want you to admit what you did out loud. No excuses, no justifications. She was crying now, real tears this time. I manipulated you. I controlled you. I treated you badly. And I'm sorry. Sorry for what, specifically? For making you feel worthless. For turning you into a joke. For being a terrible wife. I nodded. Now, here's the part you're really not going to like. I'm keeping this recording. Insurance policy. That's blackmail. No, that's consequences. For 8 years you faced none. Now you do. She collapsed into her chair, finally understanding that her reign of control was over. I never meant for it to go this far, she whispered. Yes, you did. You just never thought you'd get caught. 2 hours later she was packing, not because I threw her out, but because she couldn't stand being in a house where she had no power. Where will you go? I asked. My sister's. Good. Give her my regards, and thank her for me for taking in someone who thinks marriage is a game to be won. I'm sure that'll work out great for everyone involved. As she loaded her car, neighbors started coming out to watch. She'd always cared so much about appearances, about what people thought. Now they were all seeing her leave with garbage bags full of clothes, looking defeated and humiliated. This isn't over, she said through the car window. Yes, it is. Your secret doesn't dominate anything anymore except maybe your regret. I watched her drive away, then turned to find Mrs. Patterson from next door approaching. Everything all right, dear? Better than it's been in years, I replied. And for the first time in 8 years, I'm completely in it. 3 months later, I signed the final divorce papers in my lawyer's office. Clean break, 50-50 split, no alimony. She tried to fight for more, but the recording had persuaded her legal team that going to court wasn't in her best interest. Congratulations, my lawyer said. You're officially a free man. Free. I'd forgotten what that word meant. Walking out of that office, I felt lighter than I had in years. No more walking on eggshells. No more seeking approval for basic decisions. No more pretending that manipulation was love. My phone buzzed a text from an unknown number. I heard about the divorce. If you ever want to talk, I'm here. It was signed with just an initial, but I knew who it was. One of her friends from that Thursday night conversation. Apparently, word had gotten out about why our marriage ended, and not everyone approved of what they'd heard. I deleted the message without responding. I wasn't interested in being anyone's project or their guilt-driven charity case. That evening, I met my college friends for dinner, real friends. The ones she'd convinced me were bad influences. Turns out the only bad influence in my life had been sleeping next to me for 8 years. You look different, Tom said over beers. Relaxed. I feel different. Like I've been holding my breath for years and finally remembered how to exhale. Any regrets? Mike asked. I thought about it seriously. Only one that I didn't figure it out sooner. What finally opened your eyes? Hearing her explain her strategy to control me like I was some kind of science experiment. Amazing how quickly everything becomes clear once you stop making excuses for someone. The conversation turned to other things, but I found myself reflecting on the journey. 8 years of thinking I was inadequate, unworthy, lucky to be chosen. 8 years of believing her version of reality over my own instincts. But you know what? I wasn't bitter. Bitterness would mean she still had power over me. Instead, I felt grateful that her arrogance had finally exposed her true nature. Grateful that I'd found the strength to walk away. Grateful that I'd learned the difference between love and control before it was too late to matter. My phone rang her number. I let it go to voicemail. The message was predictable. Tears, apologies, promises that she'd changed, pleas for another chance. The same manipulation tactics, just delivered through a different medium. I deleted it without finishing. Later that week, I ran into her sister at the grocery store. The awkward conversation that followed told me everything I needed to know about how the story was being spun in her family. She's really struggling, her sister said. She says you recorded her private conversations. I recorded her describing how she psychologically abused me for 8 years. Context matters. She was just venting to friends. All married couples complain. Do they? Do you tell your friends about your secret strategies to manipulate your husband? Do you brag about how easy it is to control him? Her sister looked uncomfortable. That's not how she tells it. I'm sure it's not. But I have the actual recording if you'd like to hear what really happened. That won't be necessary. No, I didn't think it would be. As I drove home, I realized something important. Her family's willingness to excuse her behavior, to rewrite history, to blame me for her actions. It explained everything. She'd been enabled her entire life. No consequences, no accountability, no reason to change. But that wasn't my problem anymore. 3 weeks later, I heard through mutual acquaintances that she was dating someone new, some guy she'd met online who was apparently much more understanding than I'd been. I actually felt sorry for him. Somewhere out there was a man who had no idea what he was walking into, someone who would spend months or years wondering why he felt so small, so controlled, so diminished, someone who might never figure out that it wasn't his fault. But that wasn't my responsibility either. 6 months after the divorce, I was having coffee with a woman I'd met through work, intelligent, funny, direct. When she disagreed with me, she said so. When she wanted something, she asked for it. When she had opinions, she shared them without expecting me to guess. "You seem surprised when I tell you what I'm thinking," she observed. "I'm still getting used to honest communication, bad previous relationship. You could say that. Let's just say I learned the hard way that some people see marriage as a power game instead of a partnership. Their loss," she said simply. And that's when it hit me. She was right. It was their loss, all of it. The woman who'd thrown away 8 years because she preferred control to connection. The family who'd rather enable dysfunction than face reality. The friends who'd laughed at my expense. I'd won not because I'd gotten revenge or made anyone pay, but because I'd refused to accept less than I deserved. I'd won because I'd chosen my own self-respect over someone else's comfort. Most importantly, I'd won because I'd finally learned the most valuable lesson of all. The only person who could dominate your life is you. And when you remember that, when you really understand it, nobody else's secret matters anymore. Their manipulation becomes powerless. Their control becomes meaningless. Their opinion becomes irrelevant. You become free.